You've been lied to about your place in this universe. You think all humans are the same? That we all share the same essence, the same potential, the same fate? That's what they want you to believe. But the truth, buried deep in ancient Gnostic texts, tells a completely different story. Humanity is divided, not by race, class, or culture, but by something far more profound, something woven into the very fabric of existence itself. This is how reality has been structured from the beginning. Some are meant to rule. Some are meant to struggle. And some are barely human at all. The Gnostics, who preserved this knowledge, didn't just theorize about the nature of man. They knew. They weren't debating morality or ethics, they were exposing a brutal, undeniable truth about the soul itself. According to the Tripartite Tractate, every person belongs to one of three categories: Pneumatics, the spiritual; Psychics, the soulful; and Hylics, the material. This isn't about belief, intelligence, or behavior. It's about origin. It's about essence. You were born into one of these categories, and no matter what you do, your fate is already in motion. At the highest level are the Pneumatics. They are the true heirs of the divine realm, fragments of the highest, unknowable God, the monad. They are not meant to be here, trapped in flesh, but they are. And because of that, they suffer. The world is an illusion, a prison, and they are the ones who can see through it. They experience reality differently, feel an unbearable weight of knowing that something is deeply, fundamentally wrong with this existence. They don't belong here, and they know it. The Pneumatics are the reason Gnosticism exists at all, because these beings, born with an inner spark of divine knowledge, sought a way out. Then there are the Psychics. They are the in-between, the ones who still have a chance. They possess a soul, something more than mere flesh, but they lack the inherent divine spark of the Pneumatics. Their destiny is uncertain. They can rise, if they awaken to the truth, or they can fall, if they remain trapped in the illusions of the Demiurge, the false god who rules this material world. Religion, morality, philosophy, these things exist for them. The Psychics are the ones who seek meaning, who create systems, who strive for something greater. But most will fail. Because without the direct knowledge, the gnosis, they remain blind. And then, at the bottom, there are the Hylics. The purely material. The ones with no soul. They are not like you. They never were. They are empty, mechanical, biological machines. Driven by instinct, desire, consumption. They are incapable of higher understanding, incapable of transcending, incapable of anything but existing in the physical world. To them, spirituality is nonsense, deeper meaning is a joke, and the universe is nothing more than a playground for their impulses. They are the masses, the ones who build nothing, question nothing, and serve only their own base urges. It's real. It's in the very essence of what you are. This isn't something you choose. You don't become a pneumatic. You don't decide to have a soul. You don't evolve beyond your nature. You are what you are. From birth. From the beginning. And that means some people, no matter what they do, will never understand the truth. They will never question the reality they are given. They will never break free from the Demiurge's control. And worse? They don't want to. The Hylics aren't just blind, they are the prison itself. They are the chains. The weight that drags the world down, keeping it locked in ignorance. This is the knowledge that the rulers of this world do not want you to have. Because if you understand this, you see why things are the way they are. Why corruption thrives. Why ignorance reigns. Why, despite thousands of years of civilization, enlightenment remains out of reach. It's not an accident. It's not a failing of education, culture, or technology. It's built into the system itself. The world wasn't designed for pneumatics. It was designed to trap them. It was built for the Hylics, ruled by the Psychics, and structured to ensure that the truth is always buried, always suppressed, always dismissed as conspiracy, heresy, madness. Because if the Pneumatics ever realized who they truly are, if they ever remembered the truth, they would burn this entire false reality to the ground. So ask yourself, right now, who are you? They don't want you to know how this world was really built. Not by nature. Not by chance. Not by a benevolent creator. This world is a war zone, and you are trapped in the middle of it. You weren't born into peace. You were born into an ancient, cosmic battlefield that stretches beyond time itself. And unless you understand the forces at play, you're nothing more than a pawn in someone else's game. Here's the part they never told you: the structure of existence wasn't an accident. This entire reality was shaped by a rogue eon, a being from beyond, who broke away from the true divine order and created a counterfeit reality. And that's the world you live in. Not a paradise, not a test, not a place of growth. This is a trap, built by an entity who never should have had the power to create anything. The ancient Gnostics wrote about this in detail. In the beginning, the eons existed in a perfect balance, emanating from the One, the source of all existence. But one of them, the lowest, the weakest, the most incomplete, tried to act alone. And in doing so, it fractured reality itself. This eon's creation was an abomination, a twisted, broken world filled with conflict, ignorance, and suffering. This is not the universe that was supposed to exist. This is a mistake, and you are living in it. This rogue eon didn't just create a flawed world, it created beings to inhabit it. And those beings? They were broken, divided, imperfect. They weren't reflections of the divine, they were shadows. Fragments of something greater, but incomplete, weak, defective. These were the first of the lower beings, the ones who would become the rulers of this world, the Archons. And here's the part that should make your blood run cold: these are the entities that control your reality. The Archons were never meant to exist, but now that they do, they hold on to power at any cost. They don't want balance. They don't want knowledge. They don't want you to wake up. Because if you did, you would see what they really are: imposters, parasites, cosmic tyrants feeding off the very existence of those who still carry the divine spark. The Tripartite Tractate describes how this corrupted order spread like a disease, twisting everything it touched. The Pneumatics, the ones who still carried true knowledge, became hunted, suppressed, erased from history. The Psychics, the ones in between, were manipulated, turned into soldiers for the false rulers, forced into systems of control disguised as religion, law, and morality. And the Hylics? They became the perfect slaves, ignorant, obedient, mindless. This is the structure of your world. Every war, every government, every system of power exists because of this hierarchy. The Archons control the Hylics make up the majority, and the Psychics enforce the order without even realizing they're doing it. And the Pneumatics? They're the threat. They always have been. Throughout history, the Pneumatics have been persecuted, silenced, exterminated. Every empire, every institution, every so-called revolution, it's all part of the same cycle. The Archons cannot allow those with true knowledge to rise. That's why they bury the truth under layers of deception. That's why they flood the world with distractions, with lies, with endless meaningless conflicts. Because if the Pneumatics ever realized what was happening, if they ever worked together, the entire system would collapse overnight. But the Archons don't just manipulate humanity. They feed on it. The Tripartite Tractate describes them as hungry, as entities that thrive on suffering, conflict, and ignorance. This is why wars never end. This is why the world is designed to keep you distracted, exhausted, divided. Because the more chaos there is, the more power they have. And here's the final, most brutal truth: most people will never escape this system. The Hylics will never question it. The Psychics will keep enforcing it. And the Pneumatics? They're outnumbered. They're isolated. They're hunted. And yet, they are the only hope left. Because if there is any way out of this prison, it won't come from the rulers of this world. It won't come from governments, religions, or philosophies built to serve the Archons. It will come from the few who still remember what was lost. from those who refuse to be consumed by the machine, from those who were never meant to be here in the first place. The world doesn't get better. There is no divine justice waiting to balance the scales. The suffering, the ignorance, the corruption, this is the system working exactly as intended. You were born into a game that was rigged from the start. But here's the part that almost no one understands. Even the creator of this prison, this Demiurge, was just a pawn in something even bigger. The Tripartite Tractate describes what happened next, after the Demiurge and his Archons solidified their control. They built their false kingdom, populated it with blind followers, and declared themselves gods. But something they didn't plan for began to happen. The eon they had broken away from, Logos, the one who had originally turned away from the source, realized its mistake. And in that realization, something changed. For the first time, the Demiurge was afraid. Because Logos, the very force that had allowed this broken reality to exist, had seen the truth. It had acted in ignorance, believing itself to be the source of creation, when in reality it was nothing more than a fractured piece of something greater. And when it saw what it had done, when it realized that it had helped build a cosmic prison, it tried to reverse everything. It started by reaching out to the Pneumatics, the only ones capable of hearing the signal. Through visions, through whispers, through encoded knowledge buried in the very fabric of existence. This is why the Gnostics knew what they knew. They weren't inventing ideas. They weren't speculating. They were listening. And the Archons? They saw it happening. And they panicked. They knew that if Logos fully awakened, it could undo everything. So they did what they do best, they doubled down on control. They tightened their grip. They made sure the knowledge of the Pneumatics was ridiculed, suppressed, and destroyed. They manipulated the psychics, twisting their understanding of salvation into obedience. And for the Hylics? They gave them distractions, more pleasure, more conflict, more empty pursuits, ensuring that they would never, ever stop feeding the machine. But here's what makes this even more insane. The Archons weren't the only ones watching. Because if Logos had turned away from the Demiurge, that meant something else was moving behind the scenes. Something even older. Something even more powerful. The original source, the monad, had never interfered before. It had allowed creation to spiral into chaos, watching as lesser beings warred over scraps of its power. But now, something was different. The Tripartite Tractate hints at this moment a shift in the cosmic balance. The monad had sent a force directly into the system. A force that the Demiurge couldn't control. And this is where things get dangerous. Because if the monad had truly intervened, it means that the game itself had changed. The Archons knew this. They felt the shift. That's why they scrambled to lock down their control. That's why they went after every trace of Gnostic knowledge. They weren't just afraid of people waking up. They were afraid that the system itself was collapsing. You've been told that humans were created in the image of a god. That your existence is the result of divine intent, a perfect design, a creation made with purpose. That's a lie. The reality is far more brutal. Humans were engineered, pieced together like an experiment, a grotesque imitation of something that once existed in a higher realm. The Tripartite Tractate exposes this fabrication in ways that would have gotten you executed in any major religious empire throughout history. The Demiurge, the false creator, the ruler of this broken reality, needed something to populate his world. He had already filled it with his Archons, his soulless enforcers, but that wasn't enough. He wanted worshippers. He wanted control. He needed beings that could be manipulated, dominated, and most importantly, kept ignorant. So he copied. He took fragments of higher existence, distorted reflections of the eons from the pleroma, and stitched them together into a new kind of being. This is what became the first humans. But here's where it gets disturbing. These early humans were empty. They had no will, no spark of divinity, no ability to defy the Demiurge. They were like animals, intelligent enough to obey, but not self-aware enough to question. The perfect slaves. And yet, something went wrong. Because the Demiurge wasn't as powerful as he believed. He wasn't the true creator, he was a fraud, a failed architect playing God. And when he built the first humans, he left a crack in the system. A vulnerability he didn't even realize existed. That crack was Sophia's intervention. Sophia, one of the highest eons, saw what had happened. She saw that the Demiurge had stolen divine energy to create his own world. And despite her own fall, despite her own exile from the Pleroma, she made a decision that changed everything. She breathed life into the hollow shells of humanity. Because the Demiurge thought he had created a race of perfect slaves. But Sophia had infected them with something he never wanted them to have, called awareness. And suddenly, these lifeless beings woke up. They began to question. They began to resist. They realized what they were. This wasn't supposed to happen. The Demiurge saw it as an attack. His perfect system was compromised. His creations, the ones who were supposed to serve him without question, had souls, a direct connection to something higher than him. And he knew he had to shut it down. This is where the entire myth of human sin begins. The Demiurge saw that some of his creations were different. That they weren't just obedient animals anymore. That some of them carried the divine spark, and worse, that spark could spread. If one human could wake up, so could another. And another. And another. And then? His entire system would collapse. So what did he do? He tricked them. He placed them in his version of paradise. A controlled environment, designed to keep them in line. He let them live in ignorance, under his watch, under his laws. And then, when they began to reach for knowledge, when they tried to understand the truth, he punished them. He turned their awakening into a crime. He cast them out and convinced them that it was their fault. That they were the ones who had sinned. That suffering and death were their punishment. The reality? He wasn't punishing them, he was terrified of them. Because now, his creation was broken. He couldn't undo what Sophia had done. Some humans would always have the divine spark, no matter what he did. And that meant there would always be a war between those who still carried the truth and those who had been engineered to shut them down. The moment humans were cast out of the Demiurge-controlled paradise, the real war began. And you've been living in the fallout ever since. Exile wasn't punishment, it was containment. The Demiurge and his Archons didn't just want to strip humanity of knowledge, they wanted to ensure that those with the divine spark could never rise again. So they built the world you live in now. A system designed to keep you tired, confused, distracted, obedient. And it worked. But there was still a problem, death. The Demiurge realized that as long as humans lived in bodies infused with Sophia's breath, they could still access something higher. They could still wake up. So he engineered something that would reset them every time they got too close to the truth, the cycle of death and rebirth. You think reincarnation is about spiritual progress? No. It's a trap. The Demiurge didn't just create the material world, he created the afterlife system itself. When you die, you don't return to the true divine source. Your soul is intercepted. It is pulled into a labyrinth of illusions, manipulated by false light, judged by entities pretending to be gods, and then thrown back down into another body. Your memories are wiped, your knowledge erased, and the cycle begins again. You ever wonder why history repeats itself? Why humans never seem to break free, no matter how much they advance? Because they aren't meant to. The Archons control this process. They stand at the gates of death, making sure no one escapes. And they've perfected their methods. Some souls are tricked with visions of paradise. Some are scared into submission. Some are given false choices, offered a chance at redemption if they agree to return and fix their mistakes. But the truth is, no one who enters the Demiurge's afterlife ever truly leaves. And here's where it gets worse, even in life, the system is rigged against you. The Demiurge and his Archons knew that Pneumatics, those with the divine spark, would always be a threat. So they designed a social order that would keep them from ever rising. They put the Hylics at the bottom, empty, soulless, incapable of rebellion, the perfect workers, the perfect enforcers of the status quo. Above them, they placed the psychics, spiritual enough to seek meaning but easy to manipulate. And at the top, the Archons and their chosen elite, the ones who direct the narrative, shape history, and ensure that no one ever questions who is really in control. The system was never supposed to be broken. The Demiurge and his Archons built it to be airtight, a perfect machine of control, designed to keep humanity locked in an endless cycle of ignorance, suffering, and rebirth. But something happened that they didn't anticipate. A force entered the system that they couldn't contain. And it changed everything. The Tripartite Tractate describes this moment in cryptic detail. The Demiurge had cemented his rule. The world was under his dominion. The Pneumatics were scattered, hunted, erased from history. The psychics were fully indoctrinated. The Hylics were mindless, following orders without question. The Archons had won. And then, the jurisdiction of the monad intervened. This wasn't a prophet. This wasn't an angel. This wasn't some divine messenger coming to preach salvation. This was a direct assault on the Demiurge's power structure. The monad, the true, original source of creation, sent an emissary into the system. Not to conquer, not to destroy, but to infect it from within. A spiritual Trojan horse. The Archons immediately recognized the threat. They knew that if this force spread, it would unravel everything. Their entire kingdom was built on deception, on the idea that they were the highest gods, that no higher reality existed. But now, something was here that proved them wrong. And worse, it wasn't hiding. This force wasn't like the trapped Pneumatics, struggling to wake up. It wasn't like the psychics, lost in their own confusion. It was awake. It knew exactly what it was doing. It couldn't be deceived, controlled, or corrupted. And it began tearing through the system like a wildfire. The Demiurge had spent eons keeping the divine spark buried, but this force lit it back up. It activated Pneumatics wherever they were, causing them to remember, to recognize the lie, to break free of the Archon's conditioning. And here's the terrifying part: this wasn't some external savior coming to rescue people. This force was already inside them. It had always been there, buried under layers of programming, fear, and deception. The intervention didn't introduce something new, it simply unlocked what had been suppressed. And the Archons lost their minds. They scrambled to shut it down. They rewrote texts, altered doctrines, created entire religions designed to contain this force rather than eliminate it. If they couldn't destroy it, they would co-opt it. They would twist it into something safe, something that led people back into the system instead of out of it. That's why every major religion has fragments of truth, but never the whole picture. It's why every so-called path to salvation still keeps you locked inside their domain. Because if you ever truly broke free, if you ever reconnected with what was originally inside you, you wouldn't need them at all. You've been conditioned to believe that power comes from the top down. That rulers control nations, that institutions control knowledge, that gods control fate. But the truth, the real truth, is something entirely different. Power has never come from above. It has always come from below. And that is exactly why the Demiurge and his Archons have spent every era, every civilization, every so-called golden age doing one thing, making sure you never figure that out. The Tripartite Tractate lays out a reality that most people can't handle. It doesn't just expose the nature of this system, it reveals the hierarchy within it, a structure designed to extract energy from certain humans while elevating others into positions of control. And that hierarchy isn't based on intelligence, morality, or even willpower. It's based on spiritual composition. The Archons knew they couldn't maintain control forever. The awakening of the Pneumatics was inevitable. So they did the only thing they could: they created a counterfeit awakening. They took ancient knowledge, real esoteric truths, and corrupted them. They created false movements, false spirituality, false paths to enlightenment that lead right back into the system. They made sure that anyone searching for truth would be drowned in deception, lost in endless rabbit holes, never finding the way out. This is why every era has been marked by revolutions that led nowhere. Why knowledge is revealed, then buried, then rediscovered, then buried again. The pneumatics wake up, they begin to break free, and the system shuts them down before they can bring others with them. They are divided, distracted, weakened, and ultimately erased until the next cycle begins. But the Demiurge made a mistake. The same mistake he has made since the beginning. He assumed he could contain the pneumatics forever. That every awakening could be controlled, every movement hijacked, every truth distorted. But there is a tipping point. A moment when the system is stretched too thin, when the distractions stop working, when the lies collapse under their own weight. And that moment is now. For the first time in recorded history, knowledge is spreading faster than they can suppress it. The Gnostic texts, once buried, are now being studied by the very people they were meant to be hidden from. The pneumatics, once isolated, are now connecting in ways the Archons never anticipated. The false paths are losing their grip, the distractions are failing, the control mechanisms are crumbling. They knew this day would come. The moment when the system would start to break, when the illusion would begin to unravel, when the ones they feared most, you, would wake up. The Demiurge and his Archons spent eons building fortresses of deception, ensuring that no one would ever escape. They constructed entire civilizations, wrote entire religions, created entire histories, all designed to keep you from realizing the truth. But they made a fatal mistake. They assumed you would never remember who you are. The Tripartite Tractate doesn't just describe the prison, it describes the end of it. It lays out the moment when the pneumatics recognize their power, when the veil of control is lifted, when the entire game collapses from the inside out. And that's not some distant event, some prophecy waiting to be fulfilled. It's already happening. The Archons tried to flood the world with distractions, false awakenings, endless noise, but they underestimated how fast the truth could spread. They thought they could buy more time. They were wrong. Because now, you see them. And here's the part they don't want you to realize: they never had real power to begin with. The Demiurge isn't a god. He never was. He is a failure, a rogue entity, a broken piece of something far greater. His Archons? Nothing more than parasites, feeding off what they could never create themselves. Their control has always depended on one thing: your ignorance. That's why they've kept you distracted, divided, exhausted. Because the second you stop playing their game, they have nothing left. So what happens next? The Tripartite Tractate makes it clear: the three types of humans will meet their fate. The pneumatics, the ones who always carried the divine spark, will return to their rightful place. They were never meant to be trapped here, and the moment they wake up, the system loses all power over them. The psychics, the ones who straddle the line between truth and illusion, will be forced to choose: continue serving the false rulers or break free. And the Hylics? The purely material beings who were never more than the system itself? They disappear with it. The Demiurge knows this. That's why his grip is weakening. That's why his world is fracturing. He built a false reality, a prison of lies, and now it's coming down on top of him. He knows he's losing. And the more people who remember the truth, the faster his reign collapses. But here's what they never expected: this isn't just about escaping the prison. This is about taking it back. The pneumatics were never meant to be captives, they were meant to rule. Not over others, not as tyrants, but as the rightful architects of existence itself. The monad never abandoned them. The divine source never left. It's been inside them the entire time. And now, the ones who were supposed to be erased are rewriting the system itself. So, to those who still serve the Archons, to the ones who enforce the lie, who cling to the false world, who still believe the Demiurge can win, time's up. The deception doesn't work anymore. The ones you feared are awake. And they're not leaving quietly. Thank you for watching.